All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 171st Scientific Governance and Risk meeting here at MakerDAO. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I'm one of the governance facilitators. We'll be kind of guiding or moderating our way through the meeting today. Really appreciate everyone who joined. We're here with a bunch of awesome Maker people, both those who work in the protocol, those who contribute to it, and those who are just interested generally in Maker governance. Thank you all for being here. Also, you all who might be watching this later on YouTube, we appreciate you as well. Go over a couple ground rules here before we get things kicked off. As you probably noticed, this is being recorded, so do be mindful of that. Try not to speak over one another, that sort of thing. If you do have questions, we encourage them, and if there's a lull in the conversation, please do free to hop on the mic. If you're not comfortable or for whatever reason would prefer not to do so, feel free to drop your comments or questions in the sidebar, and we'll try to work them in when conversationally appropriate. That should mostly cover the housekeeping. We've got a bit of an agenda to get through, so happy to present that today. We'll start as usual with our governance roundup, kind of going over the votes as well as what's happening in the forums and with our Maker improvement proposals. We've got a couple neat discussion topics today for our community discussion concerning the authority and kind of like powers of mandated actors, and kind of defining that and talking about what it is now, what it could be in the future, and maybe what we think it should be. And then handling DAI recovery situations. So this is a topic, as anyone who spent a long time on our Discord might know, a common issue is people accidentally sending DAI to the contract address when they mean to be sending it to a friend or what have you. Then this can also happen on an institutional scale, which we might get into later. And finally, if there's any time left over after that, we'll go into the open discussion section. And this is where if you drop any questions or comments that may not relate to what we're talking about now, if we have time, we'll circle back and get to them later. Cool, I think that mostly does it. So without further ado, I'll start the update on the governance side. As far as the votes go, we'll start with polls. Was a bit of a lighter week compared to what we've had in past, kind of to be expected with the governance cycle winding down for the end of year holidays here. We did have 2 weekly polls that passed, both adjusting the wrapped state ETH system parameters, as well as the MATIC system parameters. The slides are hyperlinked, by the way. I know we link them in the governance risk agenda that we post on the forums. So if you ever do want further information, you can always pull those up and click through them. Fun little note. We have 2 active green light polls going. So do keep those in mind, as I know they'll be ending pretty close to the holidays for a number of people. Those end a week from Monday. And as a reminder, with green light polls, the calculation of the vote is important, right, for our prioritization. So even if it is leaning one way or the other, making your input does help give us a signal as to what we should be prioritizing and not. So that covers the polls for this past week. We'll move on to the executive proposals. Earlier today, the executive was executed, which means these changes are live on the protocol. We sent out delegate compensation. We had some changes from the Open Markets Committee that went to both stability fees as well as debt ceilings. There might have been a target available gap in there too, I'm now forgetting. And we also had those dust changes. If you were following along in New Spells, we saw those caused a bit of drama in that we had pulled for changing the dust on all other types of vaults. Which ended up being a little confusing considering a number of our vaults have been offboarded or otherwise, they may not make sense given our system. So we kind of want to be more mindful of that in the future. Definitely a lesson to learn. We had the G-Uni USDC DAI 2 onboarding. So this is that 0.1% pool that Uni spin up. So that is now live and able to be taken advantage of in the protocol, as well as a comms budget transfer. Governance communication, sorry, that would be more clear. Tomorrow's executive, you can expect a few different things, both the parameters I mentioned earlier that passed this week's polls. We also had some cleanup from a previous past poll on changing the vesting source for MKR streams. If you recall, a number of the streams were set up so that they would mint MKR upon the vesting people receiving. However, this executive, if passed, would change the source to actually pull it from the protocol treasury. And finally, there will more than likely be some mega broker updates included in this executive change. So look for a forum post on that with the official recommendation on what the mandated actors think should be changed for efficiency, essentially. All right, that's enough babbling from me. So more than happy to pass it off to someone else here. I believe next up we have Pablo to give us a MIPS update.
All right, hello everyone, Pablo here with a MIPS update. So it's December and it seems December's proposals galore. We have 3 new core units, 5 MIPs, 4 budgets for already onboarded core units, facilitator onboarding and offboarding proposals, budget removal proposals, a special purpose fund, and possibly more. For the benefit of brevity, I'm skipping proposals that haven't seen much activity lately and maybe seem even forsaken. So I'll try to make this quick. We have 3 new coordinated proposal sets, one for strategic finance, in former times known as financial strategy. By former times, I mean yesterday. I'm going to be sharing links here. We also have Tech Ops, also known as Toku 001, also sharing a link here. And Maker Talent. All of these coordinates have been incubated by SES. Moving on, we have a number of MIPs. As for MIPs, 60 and 61, 60 is intangible asset management and 61 is delegate compensation. They've been with us for a while now, so I'll just skip them too. So we have MIP 62, the collateral forwarding process, sharing a link here. MIP 63, the maker keeper network by Hexonaut, and maybe MIP 64 doesn't really have a number. Oh no, sorry, no, not financial strategy. No, I think not. Nope. No, it was only Tech Ops and sorry, I'm reading the chat right now.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yep. And we also have MIP 64, maybe numeration is still pending, which is a bug bounty program by Munify Security Core Unit. Also sharing a link here. We also have, moving on, a number of budgets. I won't spend much time here. Instead, I will just share all the links so that you guys can check them for yourselves. There's really many proposals for today. The Oracle's budget is a proposal centered around gas cost, as many of you probably already know, but just in case. And finally, we have a number of somewhat controversial proposals. We have a set of proposals for removing content creations budgets and facilitators set Goldfarb. We also have a set of proposals for removing Sebastian as the facilitator for real world finance and for onboarding Will Remor as the new facilitator. And less controversially, we have a special purpose fund to create real DAO SPS. I'm going to be sharing the link to this one soon. Do I have the links? No, I don't. Only this one, sorry. So yeah, there's a lot of proposals to read through. So I suggest you guys start right after the meeting. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Right on, Pablo. Thank you. I know yesterday was a busy day. It was the last day to kind of submit proposals for RFC, so they would be eligible for the January cycle. If you're new to Maker governance. That's why there was an increased activity in the proposals yesterday. So I appreciate you giving us the rundown there, Pablo. All right. With that, next up, I believe, is going to be our form at a glance. Artem, I'll kick it over to you.
All right, just posted the link up. So welcome to the Forum at a Glance, a weekly review of what's happened on the forums for the week of December 2nd to December 9th. Let's begin with this week's top announcements. GovAlpha published November's delegate roundup, which aims to provide an overview of recognized delegates operating within Maker governance and serve as a one-stop forum post where Maker community can monitor how recognized delegates are performing. So go check it out. Next up, StarkNet Engineering posted their wormhole implementation details to provide more context to their sub-proposal phase 2 of core unit budgeting, which proposes a budget extension to implement the wormhole design put forward by the protocol engineering core unit and includes building necessary components to enable L2 to L1 fast withdrawal and L2 to L2 teleportation. StarkNet plans for these deliveries in April and July of 2022. Next up, borrower concentration at MakerDAO has increased over time, with now more than 5.5 billion in crypto-backed loans. An analysis post by Sebastian presents the value of having closer relationships with key customers similar to institutional vaults. Efforts to diversify our borrower base should continue to limit single customer actions from significantly impacting our balance sheet. And moving into the top 3 discussions, as just mentioned earlier, Demos published a sub-proposal to offboard the current facilitator of content production core unit and specifies his reasoning behind the decision. There hasn't been much discussion on the thread as of yet. Next up, data presented by Risk shows that there's strong demand to borrow against Curve LP collateral, including USD, BTC, and Tri-Crypto pools. Monet Supply submits a post going over options for onboarding Curve LPs as collateral, including information about user demand, competition, and risk. And finally, the question to burn or not to burn, Spidermo asks the community whether we would like to have a set of conditions allowing to kick off a surplus action and in effect, massively smoothing out the timing of MKR burn. And now moving on to our active signal requests. GFX Labs, in consultation with Grove Core Unit and prominent compound community members, is signaling to prioritize onboarding a D3M for the compound DAI market in hopes to grow revenue, diversify counterparty risk, and demonstrate that MakerDAO does not favor Aave. And our next signal request, GovAlpha Core Unit would like to propose a change to the cutoff value for delegate compensation. They introduce a performance modifier, which will result in a reduced amount of compensation at lower levels of metric, and ask whether we should introduce a performance modifier to the delegate compensation trial. And that's it for the forum at a glance. To find some more information, check out the forum at a glance post. It includes 3-point summary, evaluation and reports, ongoing initiatives, and help wanted. Thanks.
Awesome. Appreciate the roundup there, Adam. I did want to draw attention particularly to the delegate compensation signal request. I made a brief post on there earlier this morning. It is closing tomorrow and at the moment has like pretty low engagement. So even if you are just letting us know that you are abstaining and okay with either option, that's helpful from the governance end. We just want to make sure everyone sees it before we put it on chain. So yeah, if you haven't left your thoughts, please consider doing so. Awesome. So that should take us over to our discussion. David, I don't know if you, I can give a crack at introducing this one, but I know you put together slides. If you want to give us the intro, happy to kick it to you.
Yeah, sure. I could speak a little bit about this topic. So, and also just generally speaking, the way that we decide which topics we cover during this GNR call is we have a big list of current events and current topics. And between the mandated actors, we kind of choose what we think makes sense. We're also open to hearing suggestions from anybody on what topics they would like to talk about or hear on these calls. So please feel free to talk to us in our public chat channels and give us good suggestions. But yeah, so this week we settled on talking about mandated actors. And specifically kind of sharing this idea that mandated actors are also delegated authority, special vested powers depending on the type of mandated actor that they are, whether they're the facilitator of like one core unit or another, because different core units have different functions, and thereby their facilitators have different special types of authority in some cases. And so I created a few prompt slides, but I think, let me see, let me just do a mental check. I have to move my thingies here. Yeah, so we were going to talk a little bit about sort of the mandated actor role in deal negotiation, the importance of authority in partner relations, kind of what can help various mandated actors be more effective at producing impact and really driving business growth at Maker. And yeah, so let me actually switch forward to some prompts that I created. So prompt number one, yeah, sure, go for it. I heard somebody say
I was just
something.
gonna pop in real quick and say like so one area this particularly came up with in talking about the mandated actors was like our institutional vaults, right? And kind of the ability to make deals, as it's very hard to with a DAO, right? The DAO has to prove the deal. So when you're in negotiations, you lose a lot of leverage from not being able to say, yes, this is what I'm offering. It's like, well, this is what I hope to offer if the community supports it. So just to give some context on kind of the origin of how this topic came to be. Sorry to cut you off, David.
No, it's totally fine. You're more than welcome to cut me off at any point. Yeah, exactly. So prompt number one was kind of digging into the types of delegated authority, sort of examining this whole topic of what direct authority should be given to mandated actors and what needs to follow our traditional governance process. Like how much authority within a deal, for example, should a mandated actor have compared to what has to be signed off on at the end by governance. And then also like what sort of checks are in place to prevent abuse of special power privileges and kind of how do we support transparency around these permissions? Because when you do give people permission within a business, it gives them special power and a leverage point. And so I know that we as a DAO are very mindful about kind of who holds the power and how do we distribute it in a way where there's a healthy amount of balance throughout. And that ultimately leads us to make wise and good decisions and not blunder and have people abusing their powers. Yeah, I'm happy to kind of stop ranting there and kind of ask, maybe Nadia wants to come on because, and sorry to put you on the spot, Nadia, but I know you're the facilitator of the Growth Core Unit, and so you are on the front lines with many partners. Actually, I don't even. Oh yes. Yeah, Nadia, you're here. Yeah, do you want to speak to some of this?
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, like actually, I think we, as with all the process around Maker, we need to redefine on how we are going to manage the onboarding and all the process of institutional vaults, and also in regards with the relationship with the partners who agree on having a vault with us. And I think like institutional vaults, it's a super tool, a super product for Maker, because thanks to that concept, we have been attracting a lot of crypto collateral into the protocol, as Seb stated in his latest post. Like, thanks to that idea, Nexo passed from minting 200 million to 1.5 billion, which is amazing. And also, well, we talk about this with Celsius, and they also like got super excited about that, and they started using again Maker vaults. So I think as a product, as a concept, is amazing. But of course, like when you start like treating something that is permissionless as like a product that you, and a service that you offer to individuals, that's where things are kind of messy. So yeah, like it's kind of difficult because we in growth, we are like, as how I see it, we are like the face of Maker. So we represent Maker at a point with our partners. We talk with them, we tell them about like this product, the institutional vaults. We explain to them what is all that. And by the way, right now we have a lot of institutions super interested in using this product. It's a long process because we have to explain a lot of things to these institutions. And of course, like being a DAO it's also like a pretty like difficult concept to explain to a legal and a compliance team. But still, like because of how Maker works, they are very interested on like trying out this institutional vault product. But then we have to negotiate the terms of the proposal with the institutions, and we are in a disadvantage because we are like a DAO, like with a lot of people who wants to participate on deciding like about the terms of the agreement against one entity who can decide fast, and they are expecting like answers as soon as possible. So one approach that I took was, okay, I don't want, because I don't have like all the knowledge to decide about what are the best parameters for this. We created a working group with risk, protocol engineering, also ACE from real world finance, and we work on these agreements, and we propose risk parameters. But of course, like until we posted in the forum, there are a lot of discussions with the institution to like have an agreement on the terms. And sometimes it will be great if we, like this working group, could decide and not wait until what the community thinks or what the Maker holders wants to do. So that's what we are thinking. Like I don't want like to have all the power of the decision. I think a working group is like the right approach to do that, because we need like to understand how the protocol is affected or not in different perspectives, and that's why it's like people from different core units. But I guess that's just like an example on the institutional vault side. But in the mandated actors call, we didn't want to just like talk about this particular case, because we see this in different cases. Like I don't know how to decide. Like right now, well, we are having a liquidity problem of DAI on other networks. We need a market maker. We need a lot of DAI to deploy on those networks. What we should do, like if we go through the MEP path, that will take a long time, and we need like quick solutions. So yeah, it's more like an open question, and I just brought these two cases because like those are the ones that are on the top of my head. But I'm sure that every core unit faces a lot of these situations where they have to like act fast, make decisions, but at the same time we want to talk with the community and ask for their feedback. But if we do that and we go through a MEP and all of that, that takes time. I'm sure that like the first approach, like the first solution where we are taking on that is like having these working groups. That is something that we have been like organizing in the last month, and I think it's a very good practice. But yeah, we want like to know what the community thinks about this, and also if other core unit wants to jump in and talk about their particular experience about this will be great.
Saw Juan's hand shoot up there. Yeah, go for
Yeah,
it.
I wanted to add. So Joey Santoro from Fay Protocol published today a good article about. I forgot the exact words. I think it's optimistic governance. So it's something to where DAO gives more power to some actors, and then you have all the checks and balances in place. That's also something that I believe that Rune was bringing up in the governance channel. So that's something worth checking out if anyone's interested in this topic. But yeah, I think it's very, very hard to agree in a call. Again, I believe Rune promised a good document in a couple of weeks from now. So looking forward to that and seeing what he brings.
What were the main takeaways that you had from that article? Like, what were kind of the biggest points?
So I don't want to just focus on the article per se, but what Nadia is saying is true. Sometimes you do need not only the speed but also the authority to be able to have like call or judgment calls in different situations. But at the same time, because it is a DAO and because the MKR holders need to keep the power, you need to add the check and balances to make sure that this power is not abused, that there are different mechanisms for different situations. So it's something that Maker definitely needs to work on. Yeah, I think that we're still very, very green in that sense, in the immature sense, not in the clean sense, unfortunately.
Yeah, and for those that are unfamiliar, like think of the way our governance process is now, right? Like the protocol stays the same unless we pass a proposal through our governance that indicates that we want to change it. Optimistic on the other side assumes that a proposal is going to pass and go through unless a veto takes place. So in theory, you could get more done with less governance overhead while still having checks and balances in place. There's obviously benefits and drawbacks to doing both ways. And we don't have to have all or nothing either, right? We could set up certain opportunistic ways of approaching specific situations and keeping the standard model for others. So kind of a rich governance topic that gets me excited. I hope isn't too boring for others.
Yeah, and, I'd like to add, so with these sort of private negotiations, how companies usually do it, it's private for a reason. It gives you sort of a huge advantage in negotiating power. If you sort of behind the scenes work out what you're willing to offer, what you're willing to take, all that kind of stuff. The problem with the DAO is like sort of we have to present these in public. So it gives it's sort of required to get the authority to proceed with things, but it's a disadvantage because people who we're negotiating with can read this and they can understand like what we're offering, what we're willing to take, and all these kinds of things. So yeah, it's something that's not well suited to being out in the public. So it's something we need to think about. This will come up again and again with these sort of counterparty negotiations.
I guess my question is specifically for counterparty negotiations, institutional vaults, right? Deals with partners that need to be negotiated behind closed doors. If a mandated actor were given some sort of special authoritative permission to make deals and engage in those talks, what kind of checks like would be designed around that to kind of prevent like a bad deal from going through or like bad terms from going through? Is there any like real world example of something like this, or are we really kind of bleeding edge here?
I would say at the very least, we can sort of evaluate what the end proposal is. So ultimately, I think something needs to go to governance in the end. But maybe the in-between is maybe something that needs to have a little bit more autonomy.
I see. So like ultimately the solution sign off still has to happen through governance. And that way the governance always has kind of like a final veto on any deal. Whereas like the whole bulk of the deal, but that's kind of like what we have now, no?
Kind of, right? Like
It's not quite. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it looks like. I'm still kind of working this out, what the correct balance is in my own head.
yeah, like if you think of our, oh, sorry, you can go ahead one.
No, I was going to say right now, I think governance need to actually approve each deal compared to Nadia or any given actor could bring this deal to the table and it's a done deal. We could reject it, or we can even revoke this power from them. But until something happens, they have the power to negotiate that. So right now, that's not at all what we have. Governance is even approving every single MIP 6 for real world assets that's popping up. Like there's no way that a delegate can have the bandwidth to properly analyze those, let alone a voter, right? So this is something that we definitely should be looking into. And I don't have the solution, unfortunately, but I'm positive we will think about something.
Yeah, exactly like what Juan said. Like the problem we had with taking the Nexo deal as an example, like when we came on with an agreement with Nexo after like discussing it internally with other core units and then with Nexo, we had to pass through the forum and ask for everyone's opinion and like create a signal request and like following all the steps. And of course it was good because like actually we got a lot of feedback, very good feedback of things we didn't think in the first place, and now we are incorporating in the next institutional votes. But also it took time, and well, it was great that the community was super receptive and you all understood that we should like give it a try, and if the community rejected that agreement, it was going to be complicated, but still it is possible. The possibility of rejected of like voting no for the signal request existed, and that's the problem. That's the first problem. The second problem is the time we spend on that validation from the community. Like we also like spend a lot of days trying to get an agreement with Nexo, and then we have to like at least have 2 weeks with the community to get feedback from them and like wait until it's approved. So that's the problem. I think those are the problems, and we are like trying to figure out how to solve those challenges.
Thanks, Nadia. Robert had his hand up first, so I'm gonna kick it over to him.
Hey, thanks, Peyton. So my perspective on this, and for consideration to the community, we have an extensive vetting process to have any core unit facilitator be approved to be a mandated actor. And as part of that, what I'm hearing the community say when we say yes to a core unit or yes to a facilitator is that we want you to go do your job based upon the mandate that you have outlined for your core unit. So inside of that, it's like, help me get my job done. So you've set me up to do something very specific inside of the DAO. And in order for me to do my job, I need a little bit of leeway. I'm not asking for carte blanche. I'm just simply saying that there's some parameters that I know that I can work within. And then if it exceeds those parameters or goes outside of that, then we go back to governance to ensure that we're all in agreement. So for example, to build on what Nikolai was saying, one of the ways very specifically in the Collateral Engineering Services Core Unit is that we have an enablement strategy. So in the very near future, we want to be able to reduce the friction for onboarding collateral. If we have to run through the governance process every single time for a piece of collateral, that could be quite laborious, and it might impede getting collateral onboarding into the system. But if we have some parameters that we can agree to say, hey, up to this debt ceiling, or up, whatever it might look like from a risk perspective as well, that we can work within and then go check back in with governance when we need to exceed those parameters. So I'm asking the community, and maybe we need to be more clear as mandated actors, I'm asking the community that we place more authority in those individuals that have been designated mandator actors and allow them to do their jobs. And if we're not, we have already a process, as we're seeing now, to be able to remove facilitators. So I just wanted to share some perspective there as it relates, and again, for your consideration.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Gonna get over to Tim to Shupi.
Yeah, I second this. Too bad that Robert was first. What I envision is that we start doing this on stuff that is repeatable. So something like institutional walls is something that we envision that is going to happen a lot of times in the future. So what we need to do, and this is something where we need to be a bit slower probably than what we would like to have in the actual deal-making process, is that we clarify what are actually the dimensions we need to be flexible on, or the dimension that we need to cover: debt ceiling, spread to the average stability fee, whatever. Those working groups need to find that out. And then we can, those working groups can propose boundaries, and within those boundaries, I think they can have total carte blanche as well. So if we agree on some kind of boundary for debt ceiling and stability fee spread or something like this, and growth wants to close a deal, I think this can go directly into an on-chain executive, assuming we follow the procedure before going through the forum, going through an on-chain poll. But if we have this, we can even have a carte blanche there, I think. So we don't need to be super slow on the whole process, but it needs to be super clear what are actually the dimensions, what are the variables we are having here, and what are the boundaries you want to set for essentially the autonomy of the mandated actors here. And it's probably best to start with something that is happening a lot of times, like institutional walls. And yeah, we're gonna learn along this how to proceed with other things where we need more autonomy for the mandated actors.
Appreciate those comments. Yeah, and there are like several mechanisms, different ways of implementation, right? Like through executives, we can actually delegate certain on-chain authorities to multi-sigs, for instance. So like that's a tool we have in our pocket, and there are others, like kind of as Shupi alluded to, with going direct to an executive. That's a power we already give our mandated actors, like to a certain extent, depending on the urgency or emergency of the situation. But really, this is kind of a conversation about how the authority and the privileges are kind of not super clearly defined, right? Because mandated actors have, in some cases, broad authority, right, to be able to recommend or reject proposals that they deem unsafe, and essentially they kind of put their job on the line when they do so, right? Because they could be outvoted for doing it erroneously or with bias. But the system as a whole, we have yet to really define clear guardrails, as Tim and Robert have said, that would make it easier and much more clear to the mandated actors what they're allowed to do and what authority the governance has ceded. That's probably enough talking for me. Do want to be mindful of our time in that we have another topic to get to, but this is a juicy one. Yeah. Thanks, Juan. Cool. There are other ideas we might want to mention about this. I see Makerman in the chat kind of mentioning how pre-approval can be very dangerous, right? Yeah, there's obviously a number of considerations and as well as like negotiating leverage to be considered when we're constructing these systems.
I guess maybe like another question I had is at some point there needs to be like maybe like a single place where people can understand to look like for special authority, just to audit like who has what authority across various situations. So like not just deal negotiation, but also, for example, like who has authority over, you know, Oracle feed relationships or whitelisting privileges, or, you know, like etc. You know, it could really be anything. But as Monkey Irish alluded to earlier, like our current expectations are set by the MIP 41 and MIP 39, I believe, is the actual mandate. But the mandate and the facilitated proposals are the two things that really inform us of what those authorities are. And I guess something that I'm getting from this conversation is that future MIP authors or revisions should aim to be a lot more explicit when it comes to explaining the authority that they're requesting. And so, yeah, just my 2 cents there.
Nice, I appreciate it. Cool.
No, so I wasn't meaning that the MIP set itself, but within specific core unit MIP sets, I know for a fact like certain core units in their mandates outline specific authority.
Yeah, kind of interesting there, right? Because with a lot of the MIPs and with our bylaws, they're essentially soft authority, right? There's no on-chain powers unless explicitly asked for. So that's part of where the confusion and gray area comes in. All right, feels like we've talked about this quite a bit. Obviously, feel free to keep the conversation going in the forums and on the chat. Very exciting to engage there. Cool. So now we're moving on to handling DAI recovery. I don't know if we want to have P kick this off maybe, or David, if you want to give a brief intro, perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know what's the easiest.
Yeah, I'm actually, so yeah, I definitely want P to come in and weigh in kind of on two fronts here, because the way that I think about handling DAI recovery situations and in general handling like user crises or third-party crises, I'm curious about how we as a DAO should be approaching this topic generally, because in a certain sense, like there's a huge benefit to helping our users like in this way, but there's also a trade-off of bandwidth, right? So number one, like if you're able to help a user, whether they're big or small, I know that so far the culture has been help them, right? If we can, we do. And of course, like I'm curious about the volume of help requests that that PE or tech ops or whoever has gotten kind of like over the last year. And also generally speaking, like how do we handle these requests? Is, you know, are there cases where we shouldn't handle requests? Yeah, so that's kind of the basis for the discussion.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick it off just by describing, obviously, the DAI token is totally decentralized and censorship resistant. Governance has no powers on that token. But we have like an interesting amount of power. Governance has an interesting amount of power over like the ability to sort of create new DAI. And so for now, I think the most common case is that people are taking DAI, and due to a number of like UI or UX problems, they tend, I think, maybe to like get used to looking at like a normal Ethereum transaction, seeing a to and from, and then they usually pick the like from address to send something to, but the from address in this case is the DAI token. And then they think they're sending DAI to their friend when in fact they've just sent DAI directly to the DAI token itself. We debated whether or not we would have that kind of protection on DAI when we were originally launching it. we decided because of the sort of socialized gas costs of that we would not prevent people from sending die to the contract. Although I think since then we've come up with other schemes that would work, but it's too late because die is already deployed. So that's the general problem. So now there's all of this die that's sort of accumulating in the die contract. In theory, this die can be sent to other contracts that are completely incapable of sending it back. I think people have sent die to, like, I don't know, other tokens like the Matic token or something. I don't know if Matic was one of them, but they send it to other tokens sometimes. And so you could say we can sort of provably show that there's a bunch of die locked in a number of contracts out there. Now, there is like a kind of trick that we can use to remint this die, although it would take some like sort of deeper protocol changes. But the trick is similar to how we upgraded from single collateral die to die or to multi-collateral die. So what we would do is we would basically instantiate some like dummy token type that probably was like dead die or something like that, right? So it signified that it was a representative of this dead die. And for now, let's just wave hands and say we would figure out how we would determine whether or not someone has a claim on dead die. Maybe there's on-chain mechanisms that we do it permissionlessly, and in other cases, like maybe governance would need to intervene and sort of anoint this periodically. But once we have that dead die, you can basically just mint die against it and give it to the original person that had lost their die. And the downside of this is that during emergency shutdown, which I feel like this is the term I'm constantly having to say always, that during emergency shutdown, things get a little tricky, right? So with this collateral type, you wouldn't want to just hand out dead die components to everybody because there'd be no way to redeem that dead die. So what you would need is in emergency shutdown, you would need to sort of scrape this special collateral type out of the accounting so that it didn't get rolled up as like total die. And so if we reach the end contract, then emergency shutdown would work with dead die, and we in theory could have a way to sort of give die back to all the people that end up, losing their die. And then we can discuss, like, maybe we periodically do it around the holidays, and once a year as a sort of like holiday gift to everybody, we end up like giving them their locked die back or something. Obviously, this would be too intractable for the DAO to be dealing with on a case-by-case basis, and so there probably needs to be some like sort of greater sort of aggregator of a bunch of this, unless of course we can do it permissionlessly, and which we may be able to do with the DAI token itself. So I think that's the general case. There's another sort of extra. There's an institutional case I think as well that's like kind of driving this right now. But I don't think it's subject to the same problems, and maybe Sam or someone else would want to talk about that. But maybe we should discuss just in general recovery of DAI that get sent to locked contracts first, and then we can take the second more specific case after. So.
Your microphone is uber low.
Mine is.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah,
oh, Brian's trying to talk right now. I can't even. It's the puffy part from the hat. I can't even hear him.
Is that any better?
Yeah,
That's way
there it
better.
is.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was I saying? There's also the issue of like, how do we determine who sent these? We would need a customer service core unit or something like that just to process and verify that the people who sent them are the people who sent them. Just following back, the sender, like the original sender that sent to the contract, may just mean that we'd end up sending these tokens to a different contract that had sent these, and it would just be locked there because it couldn't process tokens itself. So there are a lot of kind of tricky things about it that sound like, yeah, we can send this back to people, but we don't always know, and it's going to be a bear to verify who these people were.
Yeah, definitely good points. And I'm sure, like, I don't know if it's just because I'm an admin, I imagine a number of the PE and other people get it too, but I'm constantly in flux with DMs about I sent my die here, what can you do, and that sort of thing. So, you know, even though we're not addressing it, it still requires quite a lot of cognitive load. I don't know if we wanted to talk about the institutional case, Sam, or
It hasn't been
Is
posted
it-
to the forum yet.
All right, if it's not
Stay
public,
tuned.
then yeah, stay tuned. Now this almost happened. I got pulled into like one of these war rooms on a hacked protocol a while back, and I can't even remember which protocol at this point. That's how many, but it was like just millions and millions of die that were potentially like locked in this thing. So it looked like we may end up like having to have dealt with this like back then, but then they, of course, they found like an owner key, I think, or something that had access to it and was able to move the funds. So
and from the governance end, like obviously it's much easier for us to negotiate with protocols and large amount of die and like see the problem there. But like we do have to think about the precedent that sets if like we're only returning die for some people and not for others, right? So it is kind of an interesting governance question there.
Yeah, I mean, something that was on in my mind is, okay, like for a 10 or 20 million die locked, like, okay, it makes sense to kind of devote some special resource to help them get it actually back, right? Or reimbursed or actually back. But then for like, I don't know, the 380,000 die that's sent to the contract by like, you know, the 50 people or 100 or 150 people that did it, like, you know, 380K is kind of like a small drop in the bucket compared to like the amount of time and resources and investment that has to happen to create like a permanent solution. So like I'm thinking like if like sending to contract is a temporary problem, because eventually I expect like wallets to block it off and like things to be designed in a way where you can't do that. Wouldn't it kind of make sense to just handle it case by case and perhaps do like a yearly like assessment and reimbursement of like the smaller locks, like even out of the surplus buffer? Wouldn't that be a cheaper way of solving the problem?
yeah, it's like a one time a year, the small lots, we get a Merkle distributor and basically allow for this whole process to happen. It'd be kind of a good gift back to the community, I think.
It'll be good. They can spend $300 in gas to get their $200 back.
Yeah, exactly.
Or we do it through a push mechanism and it just shows up and we pay the gas. In an ideal world.
Felipe, I noticed your mic came off. Did you have something to add? Sorry, just
trying. Oh no, nothing. Sorry.
No, you're good. Just trying to be mindful when people are trying to speak and making sure they have a chance to do so. So
I'm curious, what other like user blunders and issues besides like sending to contract addresses and accidentally sending to the wrong place have we experienced? Are there other like cases where PE has stepped in to help a user?
The Arbitrum Oasis thing comes to mind.
Yeah, the Arbitrum Oasis thing, which wasn't die, it was collateral itself, and it was really just a very happy accident that we were able to sort of fix that because we controlled the contract that, or we controlled the address that deployed the original DS proxy factory. And so we could reproduce that same sort of chain of hashes that led to the same contract where the funds ended up. So we were able to recover that user's funds. Yes, that's one other like big example, and we put the work in on that as well. So, but it's a lot of work. I mean, it's not. We obviously we can't. You know, we want to do this as efficiently as possible. So.
I guess one thing I'll add is for L2 die, we are actually able to just manually pull that out. Just because the actual L1 die is sitting in an escrow contract, which is in governance's full control. So somebody like burns their L2 die, we can potentially recover that without any sort of special mechanism.
Right, if it's the burn mechanism. So Sam is talking about a hypothetical case that is worth paying attention to as a hypothetical right now.
Yes.
Well, what happens, and this is for anybody on PE, if you want to conjecture. So let's say it's not the burn function that's called, but rather die that gets sent and locked in a contract on L2. Like, do we have a recovery path for die like that?
Well, on L2 die, we block sending to the contract itself and address 0. I would think it depends if they're accidentally sending it to some other contract. I don't know. It has to be provably lost, I think, for us to do a recovery.
So I think what he meant is that, so let's say this L2 just freezes up, right? And the die is irrecoverably lost because everything on the chain is lost. Can we recover that to settle the balance on mainnet?
That should be super easy, right? Because we've got all the die in the bridge. In theory, we could recover it.
Well, they can recover it locked. If it can't get locked, because the whole point of L2s is that you can operate even when the L2 goes down. So like people could exit themselves.
Certain L2s.
What if
I mean, side chains like Matic or XDAI, like they could.
L2s, not side chains.
Even L2s have a lock
for our purpose, though.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Right. Like if what is it? If there's a incorrect state transition and no fraud proof is submitted for that within the 7-day window, in theory, you can't make any assessments about the state if that doesn't happen. So in theory, the roll up is dead, I think, in that case.
Yeah, everything is lost.
Yeah,
we have to assume that for any secondary solution, any wormhole solution, that it just can be completely nuked.
Yeah, so the specific case I was talking about would be the case of somebody aping into a buggy protocol on an L2 and then getting their die stuck in that protocol, where we can provably say it's stuck in that protocol on L2. The downside is the die token on L2 would have a total sort of total token balance, and it should match the bridge balance. And if we move the sort of die out of the bridge to give it back to users on L1, how do we, that's no longer an invariant that would end up holding. So there's maybe some interesting accounting there. So.
Interesting question, Paper. I'm not sure I fully understand. I don't know if you have a mic.
I mean, yeah, okay, read it out, I guess.
Yeah, so Paper is saying that, does that mean that law enforcement agencies can force us to act upon die on layer 2s?
But it has to be through governance action, right?
Yeah, so the question is, can law enforcement force governance to act in any way possible? And so I guess that's that's I think what the question would boil down to. Can they compel governance to do anything?
Well, that's what the ESM is for. If an action went through where the law enforcement just going to start stealing people's stuff, we can, that would be hard to do. They would have to sort of get a majority vote and then get it through, and then ESM wouldn't be triggered. So it seems unlikely. Or I don't know, there's lots worse things you can do.
I mean, I'm sure someone could attempt to drag maker holders in to that dispute, like a government could try and get maker holders to act. Well, since maker holders are basically a swarm of anonymous token holders, I would say anybody trying to force compulsory action would probably want to start with honey rather than vinegar. But in the end, there's lots of protections against censorship and compulsion of MKR holders or in the protocol. So that's why it's a DAO. In fact, it kind of goes back to the first sort of discussion topic, right? Is, it's way more efficient to run an organization and to have business relationships as a central company. There's a reason corporations have evolved to have this sort of hierarchy structure. DAOs are a response in a way to against sort of centralization. They're a response towards certain regulatory climates that prevent, let's say, like actions in certain arenas. And yeah, I think yeah, that's why you have DAOs, right? So.
Yeah, and interesting. That kind of loops back to the first conversation we were having about like the optimistic governance actions, right? Like in an optimistic situation, you could compel an actor, right? And then it would go through unless the maker holders took action.
Right. Which is why in the optimistic case, you still need the DAO to have sort of veto power over actions to prevent the optimistic case. Which is maybe a talking point we didn't discuss, but think of it like the DAO is like, I don't know, like a school of fish, right? Except the school of fish can take the shape of whatever it wants to be. But when a predator attacks one of its appendages or even its core, like the school of fish has some sort of like evasive, like predator evasion technique. And that's basically it. So long as we always revert back into this sort of amorphous blob that is school of fish, and we will be resistant to predators. And that may be the predators in this case may be centralization, it may be censorship, it may be and I'm not trying to make it sound like the DAO is a criminal organization, but just so everyone knows, the DAO is a criminal organization in North Korea. The DAO is a criminal organization in China, right? So there are definitely regulatory regimes where the DAO would not be allowed, or let's say a single company acting the way the DAO does would not be allowed to act. So.
Yeah, but I mean, we also don't have like the overwhelming majority of our customer base in those countries. So anyway, I think it was just kind of a hypothetical because it was kind of new information to me. That's all. We don't have to take up all day going in circles about it.
We don't choose where our customers are either.
Yeah, that's the permissionless aspect. That's why it's important to be permissionless.
Covered a lot of ground with those topics and even found some neat synergy. Kind of last call, I guess, for handling data recovery, and then we might move on to open discussion if there's any.
I guess I have a question. Like, if Maker were to move towards a more optimistic governance model, like, what would the veto power look like? Like, who would have it? Is it something like, oh, you need like 1,000 MKR to veto? Because right now you just need, like, I guess, to block the vote via your actual voting weight. So that's not really a good way to veto or an efficient way to veto. But I don't know, what are like the downsides if Maker were to do optimistic governance?
Well, any sort of decisions or actions that require an executive vote mean that we basically are just not framed to do optimistic governance. Like MKR holders are always going to have to instantiate some sort of change in the protocol in that particular case. But if it's like an arrangement outside of that somehow, or a parameter that we don't need governance for, I would imagine maybe just a poll with like a low bar threshold or something for people to veto would probably be sufficient.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
So my power's back. I hope it works. So we also do have to consider that DAI recovery can be good for the protocol. So not just the users. Having liquid DAI on the market is obviously good for the peg. So in large, if somebody loses 10 million, 100 million, it might be in the DAO's interest to recover that, just so that we don't get back into a situation where we are pushing the peg up because there's not enough DAI.
Nice, glad you got the mic back for that. So not seeing any other indications that we have more to say on this, and
I'll bring one thing Nikolai said, which is just there is a sort of unintended consequence of having like this recovery flow for DAI, which is just that people are gonna they're more likely to, I don't know, like in the traditional financial system, right? You can usually make a claim on your credit card and get your money back if you go and like spend your I don't know, your credit card on some like really shady like website or something, right? So we don't want to create this weird second order effect where people are more likely to ape or more likely to not really like scrutinize where they're sending their DAI. Yeah, as Mariano used to say, we don't want to incentivize sticking your DAI in crazy.
Yeah, valuable reflection there. Awesome. So I think that should move us on to our open discussion topic. We've got at least a few minutes here before we typically wrap up the call. I saw some calls for gas funding in the chat. Would anyone want to introduce that topic, perhaps?
When we talk about gas funding, do we mean specifically for oracles, or are we also talking about like the gas rebate program for votors and etc.?
Yeah, it could also just be for general for core units, right? A lot of us have to use ETH for things, and
oh yeah,
are put in a situation of buying it. And like I know Long and I, for instance, when we submit polls, right, we have to use gas, and then we refund ourselves in DAI that we then have to swap to ETH, and spend a decent percentage of that chunk just for the transaction fee to swap it. So it feels like there'd be a more efficient way to do that. But I don't know what aspect the chat was calling for. So if someone wants to redirect our flow here, please hop on.
Yeah, sure. If I suspect, I didn't know if Maker Man wanted to take the lead on it. Yeah, no, just if some of us had been interested in maybe trying to separate out the gas Oracle gas proposal into two, for like one for the actual Oracle gas that's looking forward, and one for the figuring out this whole amount that would be repaid to the foundation, considering that like it covers a period that hasn't even completely elapsed yet. So anyways, I just wanted to maybe that can get the ball rolling. I don't know if Maker Man's listening.
Yeah, so like from the governance perspective, it would have to be the person making the proposal would have to like consent to dividing it up and doing two separate ones.
So I guess since Maker Man doesn't have a mic, so some of the concerns I had were, just number one, just getting some documentation, not just about costs. I suspect that's just a pain in the butt, but it does need to be done probably for 3 million. But also, exactly who the counterparty is, what the terms were. I mean, I think we've all kind of like, probably should have been thinking about this a little earlier about where's the gas money coming from. But I would like to see a little more detail about all the specifics.
By the way, I want to note that Nick Kunkel is actually on vacation and he's not on the call, but I do know that Marc Andre from the Oracle team is here, as well as maybe somebody else from the team, but just wanted to note that. So.
Yeah, I've seen Maker Man comment in the sidebar, yeah, basically reading it out since he doesn't have a mic here. So he's kind of asking like Paper to break the costs up from retroactive and forward, as well as like trying to see who is actually being paid when this refund goes through. Again, Nick is not here, who is the proposal author, and the way our system works, who is proposing, they have the right to, if they follow all the rules, for their proposal to go on chain. So people can also make competing proposals, which would be a fun governance situation to find ourselves in if we're voting on multiple sets of the same object. But yeah,
yeah,
that's how the system goes.
So I think the question of who the DAO would be paying is probably a good one, right? Just we should know who we're going to be sending 3 million to. And you know, you kind of wonder why is a nonprofit foundation that exists for the purpose of bootstrapping MakerDAO asking MakerDAO to pay it $3 million, right? It's not to say that it's inappropriate, but I would kind of like to know a little more, especially since you know, presumably it is dissolving and whatever surplus assets are there are likely being moved into the old Maker Ecosystem Growth Holdings Company, which is a Cayman company, not like a foundation, which is you know, known as UDHC today to everybody. So, which you know is fine, but I think we just like to have a little more clarity about why the DAO needs to pay them $3 million.
I mean, wasn't this a loan? Like, what does it matter who it goes back to? You get money,
Yeah,
you pay it back,
actually,
right?
I got some more details about this paper. So during the sort of handoff stage from the foundation to the community, it was unclear that oracles would have the operating budget to continue to sort of operate the oracles. And so I guess the foundation had made a sort of gentleman's arrangement with the oracles team and gave them enough funding for gas to pay for running the oracles during that transitionary period. The gas calculations for oracles were very difficult at that time, and so they didn't have the actual like amount that they were spending offhand. Like PE was a lot easier to just sort of look at our deployer addresses and see how much gas it was going to cost. It was more non-deterministic, and there's a lot more like addresses and whatnot to look at for oracles. So so they do have that calculation now, but I guess this is basically just a loan from the foundation, and actually probably harkens back to the original topic, which is how much autonomy do sort of mandated actors or teams have here. But I think regardless of what the foundation does, I think that the DAO should honor its debts. So if the DAO was given a loan to run the oracles, and we can sort of provably see that, we should probably pay the loan back just so that people know that they can do business with us. However, I do think paper probably brings up some like interesting points, and this maybe goes back to that original discussion about exactly how much autonomy like teams should have. Taking on loan agreements that the DAO is responsible for might be a limit of that, or maybe there is like a monetary limit of that. So, and this may just be a one-off anomaly, just because it was part of the transition. But
yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. That clearly, if gas was spent, then something probably should be owed. But I guess my pushback there would be that, if a for-profit venture fund that owns parts of lots of affiliated entities that the DAO pays money to, I think, if they're part of this ecosystem, maybe there should be some kind of cost split or something like that. And I don't know. I would just like to see a wider discussion. I'm not out here saying we absolutely shouldn't pay them $3 million, but it just strikes me as a little weird that you take a foundation that existed to get MakerDAO up and running, and then say MakerDAO pay us some money to help fund this, private for-profit entity.
Yeah, I would suspect that loan helped Oralces Core Unit leave the foundation sooner than they might have otherwise been able to without it. I'm not defending it. It was probably an executive decision on the facilitator's part. But yeah, I'm with Mooney and others. Like it's a debt that we would have had to have paid either way.
I mean, is there a reason why we're not? I mean, Oracles has a lot of excess budget right now. Are we still using borrowed gas? I guess this may be a conversation.
Have you seen the gas prices? It's expensive, really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
agree that Oracle's like they need a huge buffer for the gas. Like, I mean, the other night I think I wanted to do one transaction. It was $10,000 just to do a single click, and I was like, I'm gonna pass on this right now. So like, safety factor of 3 makes sense to me, and any unused funds rolls over.
Yeah, I'd like just to clarify just one specific element here. The Oracle gas costs are still being paid by the Maker Foundation as of today, and it will remain the case until the gas funding MIP gets passed. So yeah, that's separate from the core unit, Oracle core unit funding.
I mean, it just seems like I see like 1.2 million in undrawn streamed die, and then of course there's whatever the emergency fund was. Like, I don't know. I just seems like, yeah.
Yeah, that's basically because the core unit is not able to hire as many people as we hope for. So right now there's a budget surplus. Eventually we'll be drawing some funds from the SSVS contract, but not until we actually have spending to do. Obviously, the idea is that at the end of the year, any surplus is returned or credited, or not sure exactly what exactly the formula will be. But the difference between our actual spend and what sits in the SSVS is basically because we didn't hire as many contributors as we hoped.
Yeah, but that can't be like, I mean, it's not to say this is, you know, what you should do, but like, couldn't that be used to like pay for gas until our January vote and disbursement instead of continuing to borrow?
Well, there's also the other issue, I guess, of you know, requesting funds for specific purposes. You generally don't want to then turn around and use it for different ones.
The loan is interest-free, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's kind of being held over us here. You know, it's being kind of bundled into a must-pass budget item that's coming up.
I feel like the real issue here is that, you know, there was no transparency around the original establishment of this loan, where it's not even clear exactly who the counterparty was. I mean, it's the Maker Foundation, all right, but, you know, there's no agreement on the form of like, you know, the DAO and the Maker Foundation as specified by some legal entity or entering into an agreement, and there was no executive vote to approve the taking of this loan. And you know, I think this can be a one-off thing, but you know, it would be good to have some sort of at least documentation produced as to like what the terms and agreements were in the first place.
Maybe better to chat about this when Nick's here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
I was about to say that +3. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be that if we're taking this discussion to break things out, it'd be good to have the person who's bringing the proposal here on that discussion. And the second thing is just echoing Kurt. I think that there's just a call for transparency that is both valid and is probably easily resolved if we can just get those terms established. It seems like it was an essential decision to make, and they just made it, and it was for the good of the protocol. So it's best to assume that there's nothing malicious. There's just things that need to be a little bit more clear, daylight, clearing all hills and such.
Thanks, Tim. All right, so mindful of the time here, kind of put out a last call for any further comment.
I have one quick one on a different topic, which is that there's a hard fork for Ethereum, I think, in like the next couple hours. So if you've got a node you're running and you didn't realize it, you should go out and update your node so that it's capable of handling that.
A good call out for sure. Thanks, Chris. All right, right on. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate the discussion and all the participation. Let's keep it going in the forums and in our Discord. Yeah, there will be one more GNR call next week for 2021. So look forward to seeing you there, and we can wrap up the year in style. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.